Welcome to JK Tells a Story, where real-life dramas unfold. Sit back and enjoy today's tale. I was standing outside the Hampton Inn in downtown Pittsburgh, not far from the point where the three rivers meet, around 9 o'clock on a Thursday night. The humid summer air carried the familiar scent of the steel mills, a smell that never really left the city. I wasn't at the hotel as a guest. I was there looking for my wife. She was inside with her boyfriend, though she didn't know that I knew about him. But I did know, had known for months now, and it was eating away at me every day, little by little, like rust corroding metal from the inside out. I was going to do something about it tonight. A man can only take what he can take, you know? For months I'd looked the other way, hoping her affair would just end. But it didn't end. Jessica continued her affair with Richard Morrison, all the while pretending to be a faithful and caring wife to me. We talk about our future plans, buying a little house someday, maybe having kids. It was all complete bullshit. She didn't mean any of it. She was already planning a different future, one that didn't include me. I kept trying to figure out what I'd done wrong. What made her run to another man? Obviously, I wasn't cutting it for her anymore. I tried to think of ways to win her back, but that was just wishful thinking. Once she got a taste for the good life with a rich man, she wasn't coming back to a mechanic's salary. You want to know about me? My name is Jake Thompson. I'm 32 years old, born and raised in Pittsburgh, and I work as a mechanic at Murphy's Auto Repair. I specialize in motorcycles, though I can handle most cars and trucks too. Been doing it since high school. Started at Murphy's right after graduation and worked my way up to head mechanic. I'm good with my hands, always have been. There's something honest about mechanical work. You diagnose the problem, figure out what's wrong, and fix it. No games, no politics, just straightforward cause and effect. I have parents and a younger sister all living nearby. Dad worked at U.S. Steel for 30 years before the layoffs, then did maintenance work until he retired. Mom worked at the local Giant Eagle. We're not rich, but we're honest, hardworking people. And I have a wife. Had a wife. Jessica Thompson, née Williams. She's 29, works as a secretary at Morrison Real Estate downtown. We live in a decent 2-bedroom apartment in Lawrenceville. Thank God we don't have kids. Jessica's about 5 feet 6 inches, shoulder-length blonde hair, blue eyes. She's pretty, real pretty. Always has been. She attracts men's attention easily. Too easily, as it turns out. We met in high school. I was the guy who fixed cars and motorcycles for other students. She was the cheerleader who needed help when her car broke down. We dated through senior year, moved in together after graduation. I proposed when I turned 25. Had a nice little wedding at Sacred Heart Catholic Church. The thing is, Jessica always wanted more than what I could give her. I could see it sometimes, the way she'd look at other couples. Friends who'd married guys with college degrees, professional jobs. She'd see their cars, their clothes, their houses, and I could tell she was comparing. That was before I found out about Richard Morrison. Richard Morrison owns Morrison Real Estate, a successful mid-sized company. Guy's worth a couple million, drives a black Mercedes, lives in a big house up in Fox Chapel. He's married with 2 kids, but apparently that doesn't stop him from having fun on the side. And that fun happens to be my wife. Jessica's been working at Morrison Real Estate for 3 years. Started as a receptionist, worked her way up to Morrison's personal secretary. The pay is decent, and I was happy for her when she got promoted. I should have been suspicious when she started working late. A lot. Should have wondered why a secretary needed to stay until 8 or 9 p.m. so often. But I trusted her. I found out about 6 months ago, purely by accident. Mrs. Patterson, one of my regular customers who brings in her old Honda Civic for maintenance, mentioned she'd seen Jessica at Romano's with a distinguished older gentleman. The way she described them, sitting close, talking quietly, his hand on hers, it didn't sound like business. That got me thinking. Started paying attention to things I'd been ignoring. The new clothes that appeared in Jessica's closet, expensive stuff. The weekly nail appointments, the upscale salon visits. The expensive perfume, new jewelry. The way she'd started talking about wanting to move to a better neighborhood. So I did what any suspicious husband would do. I started paying closer attention. Started tracking when Jessica worked late. The numbers didn't add up. She was putting way more miles on her car than just commuting. One night about 4 months ago, I followed her. I watched her drive to this Hampton Inn park and walk into the lobby like she owned the place. 10 minutes later, Richard Morrison's Mercedes pulled up. I recognized him from the real estate ads. Distinguished guy in his 50s, silver hair, expensive suit. I sat in my beat-up Ford pickup for 2 hours, waiting. Finally, they came out together. He had his hand on her back. She was laughing at something he'd said. They kissed before getting in their cars. Not a peck on the cheek, a real kiss. That's when I knew for sure. Tonight, I watched Jessica and her boyfriend walk through the hotel lobby, heading for the elevators just like before. They looked comfortable, familiar. They got in the elevator. Morrison pressed the button for the 5th floor. I'd done my homework, room 517. Morrison had been renting it regularly for months. I sat in the lobby and looked at my watch. 9:15 p.m. I considered my plan one more time. Tonight I was going to end this charade. I walked up to the front desk and asked to call room 517. The desk clerk picked up the phone and dialed. After a few rings, Morrison answered. The clerk handed me the phone. Hello. Morrison's voice was slightly breathless. I could hear music in the background. Yeah, hi. Can I speak to Jessica Thompson, please? Long pause. There's no one here by that name. You must have the wrong number. I could hear muffled voices now. Jessica asking who it was. Just tell her there's been a death in her family, I said, raising my voice so she'd hear. What? I don't know what you're. Tell her that her husband died. Tell her Jake Thompson died today. More urgent voices in the background. Just tell her her husband is dead. I repeated louder. Tell her Jake Thompson died today, and she's finally free. Then I hung up. I handed the phone back to the wide-eyed clerk, said thanks, and walked out of the hotel. My motorcycle was parked out front, a 2018 Harley-Davidson Street Glide I'd rebuilt myself. Blacked out, custom exhaust, tuned to perfection. It was the one thing I owned that Jessica had never shown interest in, the one thing that was completely mine. I put on my gear and started her up. The sound of a Harley never gets old. Like thunder. Like freedom. I sat there waiting. A few minutes later, Jessica came running out, looking panicked. Hair messed up, clothes hastily thrown on. She frantically hailed a cab. It was dark enough that she didn't see me sitting across the street. She was headed to our apartment, her apartment now. Going to search for me, call hospitals, maybe call the police. She was going to find a note instead. And my wedding ring. And the beginning of the end. As for me, I was headed for freedom. Oh my God. Oh my God. I couldn't stop shaking as the cab sped through downtown Pittsburgh. Someone had called the hotel and told Richard that Jake was dead. That couldn't be right. But the voice on the phone, it had known my name. Had known Jake's name. Had known exactly where to find me. Jake knows. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Jake knew about Richard. Jake knew about everything. Can you go faster? I asked the driver, my voice shaking. The cab flew down Liberty Avenue toward our apartment building. All I could think was, please let this be a mistake. Please let Jake be okay. I threw a 20 at the driver and ran through the lobby. By the time I reached our floor, I was out of breath and shaking. Jake! I called, bursting through the door. Jake, are you here? I searched every room. He wasn't there. But something was wrong. The apartment felt empty, different. I sat at the kitchen table to catch my breath. That's when I saw the envelope with my name on it, written in Jake's careful handwriting. Next to it was his wedding ring. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. Jessica, you can consider me dead. Our marriage has been dead for months anyway, which is why I'm leaving. I took what I wanted. The rest is yours. I've told the landlord I won't be living here anymore, so you can decide whether to stay or move. Don't look for me. I'm hitting the road for a break from work, from life, and from your fun times with Richard Morrison. It's clear you're not interested in being married to me anymore. Enjoy your life. I wish you all the best. Jake. P.S. My lawyer will contact you with information you may or may not want to use. Your choice. I stared at the letter, reading it over and over. Then I looked at the wedding ring, and it really hit me. Jake was gone. My husband, the man who'd loved me since we were teenagers, who worked his ass off to provide for me, was gone. And it was my fault. What have I done? I never thought Jake would find out about Richard. Jake was so trusting, so focused on work. He believed me when I said I was working late. And I did love him. That was the crazy part. I loved Jake even while I was betraying him. He was a good man, kind, hardworking, dependable. But Richard was different. Richard was sophisticated, successful. When he looked at me, I felt special. When we went to dinner, it was at restaurants I'd only dreamed of. When he bought me things, jewelry, clothes, perfume, they were expensive, beautiful things. With Jake, I was just a mechanic's wife. We shopped at Target and ate at chain restaurants. With Richard, I felt like I was living the life I deserved. But it wasn't supposed to cost me my marriage. I tried calling Jake's cell, but it went straight to a message saying the number was no longer in service. I called his parents. His mom answered. Mrs. Thompson? It's Jessica. Is Jake there? Long pause. When she spoke, her voice was cold. No, Jessica. He's not here. Do you know where he is? I need to talk to him. There's been a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? She laughed bitterly. Is that what you call it? My stomach dropped. Jake had told them. You've done enough, she said and hung up. I walked around the apartment, really looking at it. Jake had taken his things. Not everything of the furniture was still there, but his personal stuff was gone. There were 2 black garbage bags by the door with more of his belongings. Things he'd decided weren't worth taking. I went to the fridge and found a bottle of wine we'd been saving. I poured a glass and sat back down, staring at Jake's letter and wedding ring. How did I get here? I thought. How did I become the kind of person who destroys her marriage for expensive dinners and jewelry? Because that was the truth. Richard wasn't going to leave his wife for me. He'd never said he would. What we had was excitement, was feeling desired, was the thrill of being with a successful man. That kind of love was what I'd had with Jake. And I'd thrown it away for what? Some fancy meals and nice gifts? The fantasy that I was too good for my blue-collar life? Somewhere out there, Jake was riding his motorcycle toward a new life, one that didn't include me. And I was sitting alone, surrounded by the wreckage of the best thing that had ever happened to me. I still loved him. Even after everything I'd done, I still loved my husband. But love wasn't enough. Not when you'd betrayed it. I didn't sleep much that first night. Got a room at a Motel 6 about an hour east of Pittsburgh and spent most of it staring at the ceiling, thinking about what I'd done and what came next. Part of me felt guilty about the phone call. Jessica's face when she'd run out of that hotel. She'd looked genuinely terrified. But then I remembered all those nights she'd come home late with excuses about work. All those times she'd kissed me hello smelling faintly of expensive cologne. I got up early, checked out, and sat in the parking lot drinking coffee, looking at the map spread across my fuel tank. I had the whole country in front of me and no particular place I needed to be. The plan was simple: head west. Maybe California, maybe just see how far I got. I had enough money saved to last a few months if I was careful, and Murphy had said he'd try to hold my job. But first I had a stop to make. I pulled into my parents' driveway around noon. Dad was in the garage, working on his '79 Camaro, a project he'd been tinkering with for 15 years. Jake? What are you doing here on a Thursday? I killed the engine and pulled off my helmet. We need to talk. We went inside where Mom was making lunch. Jacob, she said, surprised but pleased. What a nice surprise. She stopped when she saw my expression. What's wrong? She asked quietly. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd eaten breakfast before school, done homework, told them I was going to marry Jessica. Jessica and I are done, I said. The words hung in the air. Dad sat across from me. Mom stood frozen. What happened? Dad asked. I told them. Not everything. They didn't need the sordid details. But I told them about Richard Morrison, about the affair, about how I'd found out. I told them I was leaving town for a while to clear my head. When I finished, the kitchen was quiet. Son, I'm sorry, Dad said finally. I know how much you loved that girl. I thought she loved me too. Mom came over and took my hand. Maybe she did in her way. But sometimes people want different things, and they make bad choices about how to get them. She could have just told me, I said. If she wasn't happy, we could have gotten divorced. Why lie about it for so long? Dad was quiet, thinking. Some people are cowards. They want what they want, but they don't want to face the consequences. So they try to have it both ways. Where are you planning to go? Mom asked. West. Maybe Colorado, maybe California. I'll know when I get there. They didn't try to talk me out of it. We talked for another hour about practical things. Before I left, Dad pulled me aside in the garage. Jake, you're a good man. What Jessica did, that's not about you. That's about her and her choices. Don't let this make you think there's something wrong with you. I felt my throat tighten. Thanks, Dad. Your mom and I are proud of you. The way you're handling this takes guts. You're doing the right thing. I hugged him, then said goodbye to Mom. I started the Harley and headed for the interstate, leaving the only home I'd ever known. For the first time in months, I felt like I was doing the right thing. The next few days were a blur of highway, small towns, and cheap motels. I rode through Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, putting miles between me and my old life. I wasn't in any hurry. This wasn't about getting somewhere as much as leaving somewhere behind. I'd forgotten what it felt like to exist just for myself. If I saw an interesting diner, I'd stop. If there was a scenic overlook, I'd pull over. If I got tired, I'd find a motel. It was in Missouri, riding through the Ozark Mountains, that I really started to feel the weight lifting. The road wound through forests and past clear streams, and the air smelled like pine and possibility. I pulled over at a scenic overlook and sat on my bike, looking out over the valley. For the first time in years, I could go anywhere, do anything. I didn't have to be home by a certain time, didn't have to call anyone, didn't have to make excuses. I was free. The realization hit me physically, this loosening in my chest, like I'd been holding my breath for months. Part of me felt guilty for feeling so liberated. Shouldn't I be more heartbroken? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that what Jessica and I had built hadn't been as solid as I'd thought. Maybe it never had been. The truth had set me free, even if the truth sucked. I spent that night in a small town called Mountain View, at the Dogwood Inn. The owner, Betty, was a woman in her 60s who checked me in personally. The Ozark Cafe down the street, she said, handing me an actual key. Best chicken and dumplings you'll ever have. The cafe was exactly what you'd expect: linoleum floors, red vinyl booths, coffee that had been sitting on the burner since morning. But the food was incredible, and Martha, the owner, came over to check on me. You're not from around here, she said. Pittsburgh, just passing through. That's a nice-looking bike out front. Thanks. I rebuilt the engine myself. She nodded approvingly. My late husband was handy with engines too. Always said there was something honest about mechanical work. You break something, you fix it. We talked about motorcycles and small towns. When I got up to leave, she waved away my tip. You take care of yourself, she said. Remember, sometimes the worst thing that happens opens the door to the best thing that's gonna happen. I thought about those words as I walked back to the motel. Back in my room, I called Murphy. Jake, how you doing, kid? Where are you? Missouri. Little town called Mountain View. Missouri? You don't mess around. How's the bike running? Like a dream. Good. Listen, your job's here when you get back. Take all the time you need, but don't take too long. I can't hold it forever. I appreciate that, Murphy. After I hung up, I sat on the bed with my maps spread out. I'd covered almost 500 miles in 2 days. At this rate, I'd be in Colorado by the weekend. But for the first time since leaving Pittsburgh, I wasn't thinking about my destination. I was thinking about the journey itself, the freedom of the road, the kindness of strangers, the way each mile was taking me further from who I used to be and closer to who I might become. I fell asleep listening to crickets and distant trucks on the interstate. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. 3 days had passed since Jake left, and I still couldn't accept that he was really gone. I'd taken sick days from work, telling Richard's secretary I had the flu. I couldn't face going in, couldn't pretend everything was normal. Richard had called my cell several times. I'd let them all go to voicemail. The messages progressed from concerned to irritated to demanding. I deleted them all without calling back. I had bigger problems, like the fact that I couldn't afford the apartment on my salary alone. Jake had been paying about 60% of our expenses. His take-home from the shop was around $45,000 a year. Mine from the real estate office was around $32,000. Now I'd have to find a cheaper place. I was folding Jake's clothes, the things he'd left in the garbage bags, when I found the letter from his lawyer. It had been slipped under the door. Ms. Thompson, I am writing to inform you that you have been removed from Mr. Jacob Thompson's health insurance policy, effective immediately. All joint financial accounts have been closed, and Mr. Thompson's portion withdrawn. Mr. Thompson does not wish contact at this time. Any correspondence should be directed to this office. Under Pennsylvania law, you may file for divorce on grounds of abandonment after 1 year of separation. If you wish to file at any time, have your attorney contact this office. Sincerely, Margaret Collins, attorney at law. I read it 3 times before it sank in. Jake had cut me out completely. He wasn't just leaving me, he was erasing me. And he had every right to. My phone rang. Richard again. On the 3rd call, I answered. What do you want, Richard? Jesus, Jessica. Where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for 3 days. I've been dealing with personal issues. Is this about that phone call? I've been thinking, and maybe it was just a crank call. It wasn't a crank call. It was my husband. Silence. Your husband? How did he know where to find you? He's been watching us. He knows about the affair, Richard. Everything. Shit. Where is he now? He's gone. Left me a note and took off on his motorcycle. Well, that's good news, isn't it? Now you don't have to sneak around. We can be together openly. I stared at the phone. Good news? Richard, my marriage just ended. How is that good news? Come on, Jess. You weren't happy with him. You told me that yourself. Had I said that? I tried to remember our conversations, the things I'd said when I was feeling frustrated about money or bored with our routine. I'd complained about Jake sometimes, but had I really said I wanted out? That was just venting, I said. I didn't mean I wanted to leave him. Then why were you with me for months? I didn't have an answer that made me look like anything other than a selfish woman who'd wanted her cake and to eat it too. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet apartment thinking, what did I really want? Months ago, I would have said Richard, his money, his lifestyle, his sophistication. Now I wasn't so sure. Yes, Richard could give me those things. But could he give me what Jake had given me? Loyalty, dependability, unconditional love? I picked up Jake's wedding ring and slipped it onto my thumb. For 7 years, this ring had meant Jake Thompson was taken. Now it was just a piece of metal on my kitchen table, and the man who'd worn it was somewhere starting a new life without me. I'd made my choice. Now I had to live with it. I made it to Colorado 3 days later. The Rocky Mountains were everything I'd imagined and more. Driving through Kansas had been like crossing an ocean of wheat, but somewhere around the Colorado border, the land started rising, and suddenly these massive peaks appeared on the horizon. I spent a couple days in Denver, getting used to the altitude. From Denver, I headed west into the mountains, following a scenic route through small towns. The road climbed steadily, and I could feel the Harley working harder in the thin air. But the views were incredible. It was outside a little town called Leadville that my bike decided to give me trouble. I was about 10 miles from town, riding through a valley surrounded by snow-capped peaks, when I heard something no motorcyclist wants to hear. Grinding from the engine, followed by loss of power. I managed to coast to the roadside before the bike died. I was in the middle of nowhere. Mountains all around, no cell service, and the sun setting. The temperature was dropping fast. I tried starting the bike a few times, but it was no use. I was beginning to think I might spend the night on the roadside when I heard motorcycles approaching. 2 bikes came around the curve, moving fast but controlled. They slowed when they saw me, then pulled over. The first rider killed the engine and pulled off their helmet. It was a woman. She had dark hair in a ponytail and was wearing full riding gear. "You okay?" she asked, and I immediately noticed the accent. "French. Engine trouble," I said. "I'm Jake, by the way." "Sophie," she replied, dismounting. She nodded toward the other rider. "And this is Mark." Mark turned out to be French too, probably in his 30s, with a travel-worn beard. They were both friendly, concerned, and completely unfazed by finding a stranded motorcyclist. "What kind of problem?" Sophie asked, walking over to my bike. I described what had happened. She listened carefully, then asked if she could take a look. "Be my guest." I watched as she examined the bike systematically, checking oil, testing the clutch, listening when I tried to start it. After a few minutes, she straightened up. "I think it's your transmission," she said. "The grinding sound, combined with the power loss." "Yes, definitely transmission. Can it be fixed?" She looked at Mark, and they had a quick conversation in French. "Not here," she said. "You'll need a proper shop. There's a good one in Leadville. We passed it coming out." "How do you know about motorcycle shops in Leadville?" Sophie smiled a really nice smile. "We've been traveling for several months. You learn to find good mechanics wherever you go." Mark had been studying a map. He said something to Sophie in French, then turned to me. "We can help you get to town. I have towing equipment. We can rig something up." I was amazed. Here I was, stranded in the mountains, and these strangers were offering help. "That's incredibly kind, but I could call a tow truck." Sophie laughed, warm and genuine. "Out here? Good luck getting cell service, and even if you do, a tow truck will cost several $100s and take hours. We can have you in town in 30 minutes. So that's how I found myself being towed into Leadville, Colorado, by a French woman on a BMW motorcycle. The shop was called Rocky Mountain Cycles, run by a guy named Dave who looked like he'd been working on bikes since before I was born. He confirmed Sophie's diagnosis. "Transmission's shot," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "I can rebuild it, but it'll take a few days and about 1,200 in parts." I winced, but what choice did I have? "Good news is I've got the parts," Dave continued. "Bad news is I'm backed up, so it'll be at least 4 days. For days stuck in Leadville." I was trying to figure out where I'd stay when Sophie spoke up. "There's a nice bed and breakfast down the street. The Mountain View Inn. Very reasonable rates. You seem to know this town well for someone passing through." She smiled again. "Mark and I have been here 3 days already. His bike needed work too, routine maintenance. We've been exploring while we wait." After we got my bike settled at Dave's, Sophie offered to show me around town. Mark said he wanted to work on photos, so it was just the two of us walking down Leadville's main street. The town was straight out of a Western historic buildings, wide streets, mountains on all sides. Sophie explained that it had been a silver mining town in the 1800s, one of the richest in the country. Now it was mostly a tourist destination. "So what brings you to Colorado?" Sophie asked as we stopped to look at a statue of some local mining pioneer. "Just traveling," I said. I wasn't ready to get into the whole story about Jessica. Needed to get away from some things back home. She nodded knowingly. "Ah, the therapeutic road trip. I understand completely. What about you? What brings two French people to the middle of Colorado?" "Adventure," she said simply. "Mark and I are riding across America, coast to coast. We started in New York 3 months ago, planning to end in San Francisco. That's quite a journey. Are you too?" I let the question hang. She gave me a puzzled look, then laughed. "Oh no, Mark is my cousin. We both love motorcycles. We both had vacation time saved up, and we both wanted to see America. We spent the next couple hours walking around Leadville, and I found myself enjoying her company more than I'd expected." Sophie was easy to talk to. She asked questions without being nosy, shared stories about their travels without making it sound like bragging. She told me about growing up in Lyon, where her father was a professor and her mother worked for the city government. She'd studied engineering in college, then got a job with a company that designed wind farms and solar installations. "I love the idea of creating something that will make the world better," she said as we sat on a bench outside a coffee shop. Renewable energy isn't just about engineering. It's about hope. I told her about Pittsburgh, about working with my hands, about the satisfaction I got from fixing things that were broken. There's something honest about mechanical work, I said. You diagnose the problem, figure out what needs to be done, and then you do it. No politics, no games. We had dinner that night at a little Italian place. All four of us, including Mark. He turned out to be a photographer documenting their cross-country journey for a French travel magazine. He showed me some of his photos, and they were incredible. You should come with us, Mark said suddenly over dessert. At least for part of the way. The more people we have, the safer it is, and the more interesting the conversations. I looked at Sophie. She was looking back at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Interested. Maybe? Hopeful? What do you think? She asked. Interested in extending your therapeutic road trip? I thought about it. My original plan had been vague anyway. Just ride west until I felt like stopping. And there was something about these two that I found appealing. They had an energy, an enthusiasm for life that I hadn't felt in a long time. Where are you headed next? I asked. Utah, Sophie said. Then Nevada and finally California. We want to ride through desert areas, maybe see the Grand Canyon. We're also thinking about taking a detour south, Mark added. Maybe ride down through Mexico, see Central America. Real adventure travel. Mexico. I'd never been to Mexico. Let me think about it, I said, but I was already pretty sure what my answer would be. The next morning, I woke up feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Excitement about the future. I'd spent so long focused on what I was running away from that I'd forgotten to think about what I might be running toward. Maybe that was about to change. I found Sophie and Mark having breakfast at the BB. They looked up expectantly when I approached their table. So, Sophie said, have you decided? I looked at both of them. These two people who'd appeared out of nowhere to help a stranded American, who were now offering to share their journey with me. If the invitation's still open, I said, I'd like to join you. Sophie's face lit up with a smile that made my stomach flip. Wonderful. This is going to be quite an adventure. And for the first time since leaving Pittsburgh, I believed her. 3 days later, my Harley was running better than it had in months, thanks to Dave's expert work. Sophie, Mark, and I had spent the time getting to know each other, and I was feeling anticipation I hadn't experienced in years. So what's the real story? Sophie asked as we sat on the porch of the Mountain View Inn, drinking coffee and watching the morning light hit the mountains. You mentioned needing to get away from some things back home. I'd been dreading this question, but I'd also been expecting it. These people had welcomed me into their journey, and they deserved to know something about why I was running away from my old life. So I told them, not everything. They didn't need all the sordid details about hotel rooms and secret phone calls. But I told them about Jessica, about the affair, about how I'd found out and how I decided to leave. When I finished, the table was quiet for a moment. Then Sophie reached over and put her hand on mine. I'm sorry, she said. Betrayal is always painful, but betrayal by someone you love and trust, that cuts very deep. You sound like you speak from experience, I said. She was quiet for a moment, then said, my ex-fiancé left me for someone else. We were supposed to be married last spring. Instead, I spent the money we'd saved for our honeymoon on this motorcycle trip. I'm sorry too, I said. Don't be. Best investment I ever made. I've seen more of the world in the past 3 months than I had in the previous 3 years. And I've learned that I'm much stronger than I thought I was. Mark raised his coffee cup. To new beginnings, he said. To new beginnings, Sophie and I echoed. Our plan was to head south through New Mexico, cross the border at El Paso, and follow the Mexican coast down toward Acapulco. From there, we'd see where the road took us. The ride through New Mexico was spectacular. We passed through Santa Fe with its adobe buildings and art galleries, then continued south through landscapes that looked like Western movie sets, red rocks, mesas, endless blue sky. Sophie and Mark had invested in good communication equipment, Bluetooth headsets that let us talk while riding. It made the long highway stretches much more enjoyable, and I found myself learning about French culture, European travel, and life outside the small world I'd known in Pittsburgh. The thing about America, Sophie said through the headset as we rode through spectacular desert, is the scale. In France, you can drive 2 hours and pass through 3 different regions. Here, you can drive 2 hours and still be in the same state. Is that good or bad? I asked. Neither. Just different. It makes you think about space and time differently. In Europe, we're always aware of history, of civilization layers. Here, it feels more primordial. Mark chimed in from behind us. It's very American, this open road idea, endless possibility. Very romantic. Europeans love the concept, but most of us live too close together to really experience it. We crossed into Mexico at El Paso the next day, and immediately I felt like I'd entered a different world. The colors were brighter, the sounds different, the smells of food and life filled the air. Sophie handled the border paperwork like a pro. Our first real stop was a small town called San Miguel de Allende, about 4 hours south of the border. Sophie had stayed there during her college trip and wanted to show us around. The town was incredible, narrow cobblestone streets, colonial architecture, a central plaza where families gathered in the evening. We found a small hotel near the center and spent 2 days exploring. It was there, on our second night, that things between Sophie and me began to change. We'd had dinner at a restaurant overlooking the plaza, then walked around town as the evening cooled off. Mark had gone back to the hotel to work on photos, so it was just Sophie and me wandering the quiet streets. "Thank you," I said as we sat on a bench in a small park. "For what?" "For this. For inviting me along. For showing me this place. A week ago I was in Pittsburgh, feeling sorry for myself. Now I'm in Mexico with 2 people I barely know, and I feel more alive than I have in years." Sophie was quiet for a moment, then said, "I know exactly what you mean. After Philippe, my ex-fiancé, left me, I thought my life was over. I was so focused on the future we'd planned that I forgot there might be other futures possible." "Do you think you'll go back to him?" She looked at me with surprise. "Go back? Why would I go back to someone who chose someone else over me?" "I don't know. People do sometimes. Forgive and forget. Work things out." "And is that what you would do? If Jessica came to you tomorrow and said she was sorry, would you take her back?" I thought about it. A month ago, I might have said yes. I'd loved Jessica, believed love could overcome anything. But now, no, I said, surprising myself with the certainty. I don't think I would. Why not? Because I realized something on this trip. It wasn't just that she cheated. It was that she was willing to live a lie, day after day, month after month. She looked me in the eye and told me she loved me while planning to meet another man. That's not just betrayal. That's something I can't forgive. Sophie nodded. Yes, exactly. There's one thing to fall out of love, or realize you want something different. It's another thing to be dishonest about it. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the last few people cross the plaza. Can I ask you something? Sophie said eventually. Of course. What do you want to do when this trip is over? Do you want to go back to Pittsburgh? Back to your old life? It was a question I'd been avoiding. I don't know, I admitted. The shop will probably take me back, and I've got family there. It's home. But I don't feel like the same person who left Pittsburgh. I don't know if I can go back to that life, pretending nothing has changed. Sophie turned to face me. Then don't. What do you mean? I mean, don't go back to your old life. Create a new one. Before I could respond, she leaned over and kissed me. It was gentle, tentative, asking a question rather than making a demand. And without hesitation, I kissed her back. When we finally broke apart, she rested her forehead against mine. Is this crazy? She whispered. Probably, I said. But I don't care. Meanwhile, back in Pittsburgh, I finally forced myself to return to work. I couldn't afford to take any more sick days, and hiding in my apartment wasn't solving anything. But going back meant facing Richard every day, and I wasn't sure I was ready for that. My first day back, I kept my head down and tried to focus on work, answering phones, scheduling appointments, preparing contracts, the routine tasks that had made up my life for 3 years. It felt strange, like I was playing a role in a play I no longer wanted to be in. Around noon, Richard's office door opened. He walked out with clients, a wealthy-looking couple probably shopping for expensive homes. He was in full sales mode, charming and attentive. He saw me at my desk and nodded politely, as if we were just colleagues who barely knew each other. The clients would never have guessed we'd been having an affair for months. After the clients left, he came over to my desk. "Jessica," he said quietly, "we need to talk." "No, we don't," I replied, not looking up from my computer. "Look, I understand you're upset about what happened with your husband." "Don't," I said, finally looking at him. "Don't you dare talk about Jake. You don't get to have an opinion about my marriage." He glanced around the office, making sure no one was listening. "Can we at least discuss this professionally? You're my secretary, Jessica. We have to work together." "You're right," I said. "We do have to work together. So let's keep it professional. You give me assignments, I complete them, we interact only as much as necessary. That's it." He stared at me, and I could see anger building in his expression. Richard Morrison wasn't used to being dismissed. "Fine," he said finally. "Have it your way." The next few days were tense but manageable. Richard kept his word about staying professional, though I could feel his eyes on me sometimes. The other women in the office started treating me differently too. Nothing obvious, but I could sense something had changed. It was Sarah, one of the other secretaries, who finally told me what was going on. "Jessica," she said during lunch break, "can I ask you something?" We were in the break room, eating sandwiches from the deli down the street. Sarah was in her 50s, had been working in real estate for 20 years. "Sure," I said. "Are you and Mr. Morrison, have you two been?" She trailed off, clearly uncomfortable. My stomach dropped. "Why are you asking?" "Because everyone's talking about it. The way you two have been acting lately, the tension. And Linda Morrison came by yesterday to pick up some papers from when their divorce was being finalized. She made some comments about you, about how she wasn't surprised that Richard had been entertaining his secretary during their marriage." I felt the blood drain from my face. "She knows." Sarah nodded sympathetically. "Honey, I think everyone knows. Linda hired a private investigator during the divorce proceedings. She has photos, receipts, everything." I put my head in my hands. This was exactly what I'd been afraid of. That our affair would become public knowledge, that people would judge me, that my reputation would be destroyed. "Sarah, I need you to be honest with me," I said. "What do people really think of me?" She was quiet, choosing her words carefully. "Jessica, you're a nice girl, and everyone likes you personally. But, well, some people are saying that maybe you got a little too comfortable with the perks of working for a wealthy man. The expensive clothes, the long lunches, the special treatment." I felt sick. "They think I'm a gold digger." "I don't think that," Sarah said quickly. "But some people are wondering what you were expecting from the relationship." After Sarah left, I sat alone in the break room, thinking about what she'd said. Was that really how people saw me? As someone who'd traded favors for expensive dinners and designer clothes? The worst part was that they weren't entirely wrong. I had enjoyed the gifts, the fancy restaurants, the feeling of being pampered. I told myself it was harmless, that I deserved to be treated well. But Jake didn't understand. Jake was gone, probably somewhere in the western United States, trying to forget he'd ever been married to me. From San Miguel, we continued south along winding mountain roads that took us through small villages where children waved at us as we passed. The landscape gradually changed from desert to more tropical, and by the time we reached the coast, we could smell the ocean in the air. Puerto Vallarta was everything Sophie had promised. A perfect mix of authentic Mexican culture and resort town amenities. We found a small hotel a few blocks from the beach and spent 3 days there, swimming, exploring the old town, and eating some of the best food I'd ever tasted. It was there that Sophie and I really began to know each other beyond the surface level. We'd take long walks on the beach in the evenings while Mark worked on his photos, talking about everything, our childhoods, our dreams, our fears about the future. I learned that Sophie had grown up in Lyon, the daughter of a physics professor and a high school teacher. She'd always been good with her hands and had gotten interested in engineering through a summer job at a renewable energy company. "I love the idea of creating something that will make the world better," she told me as we watched the sunset from a beachside cafe. "Wind farms, solar installations, they're not just engineering projects, they're hope made concrete." I told her about growing up in Pittsburgh, about my dad's pride in working with his hands, about how I'd always found peace in the rhythm of fixing things. "There's something satisfying about taking something broken and making it work again," I said. "Whether it's an engine or a transmission, you diagnose the issue, figure out what needs to be done, and then you do it. It's honest work." "Is that what you were trying to do with your marriage?" she asked gently. "Fix something that was broken?" I thought about that. Maybe. But some things can't be fixed, can they? Some things are broken in a way that makes them not worth saving. She reached over and took my hand. And some things that seem broken just need the right person to see what they could become. From Puerto Vallarta, we continued south along the coast. The riding was spectacular, winding coastal roads with the Pacific Ocean on one side and mountains on the other. We'd stop frequently to take pictures, to eat at roadside stands, to swim in hidden coves. But the real journey was happening between Sophie and me. Each day brought us closer together, and each night brought new conversations, new discoveries about each other. It was in a small beach town south of Mazatlan that things between us became more intimate. We'd had dinner at a restaurant right on the beach, then walked back to our hotel as the moon reflected off the water. Mark had gone to bed early. He'd been fighting a stomach bug. So Sophie and I found ourselves alone on the hotel's rooftop terrace, looking out over the bay. "Jake," she said suddenly. "Yeah. I need to tell you something." My heart sank. Here it comes, I thought. She's going to tell me this has been a mistake, that she's not ready, that she needs to focus on her own healing. "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm falling in love with you." I stared at her. Of all the things I'd been expecting, that wasn't one of them. "I know it's crazy," she continued quickly. "We've only known each other for 2 weeks, and we're both dealing with difficult breakups, and we're from different countries." I stopped her by kissing her. "When we broke apart," I said, "I'm falling in love with you too." That night, for the first time since leaving Pittsburgh, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Back in Pittsburgh, I'd made a decision that would change everything. The afternoon after my conversation with Sarah, I sat at my desk trying to process everything that had happened. My affair with Richard was common knowledge, my marriage was over, and my reputation was destroyed. I felt like I was drowning in the consequences of choices I'd made without thinking them through. Around 4 p.m., Richard emerged from his office with another client. As they walked past my desk, I heard him making promises about financing, dropping names, using that same confident tone he'd used with me for months, making me feel special while never actually promising anything concrete. After the client left, Richard came over to my desk. He looked around to make sure we weren't being overheard, then leaned down close to me. "Jessica, this silent treatment has gone on long enough. We need to talk about our situation." "Our situation?" I kept my voice level, professional. "You know what I mean. About us, about what happens now that you're available." The word available hit me like a slap. Is that how he saw me? As merchandise that had suddenly become available? "Richard," I said, still looking at my computer screen. "There is no us. There never really was. Was there?" "What do you mean?" "Of course there was. We've been together for months. We've been having an affair for months. That's different from being together." His face flushed slightly. "Jessica, you're being ridiculous. You're upset about your marriage, and you're taking it out on me. But I'm not the one who ended your marriage. Your husband did that when he left." I finally looked up at him. "No, Richard. I ended my marriage when I started sleeping with you. Jake just made it official. Fine. Your marriage is over. Now we can move forward without sneaking around. Isn't that what you wanted?" "What I wanted?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I wanted to feel special. I wanted to feel like I mattered to someone successful. I wanted expensive dinners and nice jewelry and the fantasy that I was living a better life. And I gave you all of that. No, you gave me the illusion of all of that. You gave me just enough to keep me interested, but never enough to actually change my life. You never once mentioned a future together, never talked about leaving your wife, never suggested that what we had was anything more than convenient entertainment. Richard straightened up, and I could see his patience wearing thin. Jessica, I don't know what kind of fairy tale ending you thought this was going to have, but let's be realistic. I'm a successful businessman with a complicated personal life. You're a secretary who was unhappy in her marriage. We found each other, we had some good times, and now we can continue having good times without the complications. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? I said, standing up and facing him. Is that I destroyed my marriage for some good times. What's wrong with that is that I threw away the love of a good man for someone who thinks of me as a convenient way to pass the time. You're being dramatic. Am I? Answer me this. Richard, do you love me? He hesitated just long enough to give me my answer. Love is complicated, Jessica. What we have is over, I said, cutting him off. I'm turning in my resignation, effective immediately. I'll work through the end of the week to finish up any pending projects. And then I'm done. You can't be serious. You'll never find another job that pays this well, especially not with your reputation. The threat was unmistakable, and it confirmed everything I'd been thinking about Richard Morrison. Maybe not, I said, but I'll find a job where I can look at myself in the mirror every morning. That evening, I called a divorce lawyer. I'd like to file for divorce from my husband as soon as possible, I told the woman who answered. I see. May I ask the grounds? I thought about it. I could claim abandonment, make Jake look like the bad guy, or I could tell the truth. Adultery, I said. I had an affair, my husband found out, and he left me. I'd like to make the divorce as quick and clean as possible. That's refreshingly honest, Mrs. Thompson. Most people in your situation try to blame the other party. My husband is a good man who deserved better than what I gave him. The least I can do is make this easy for him. We made it to Acapulco 5 days later. The city was everything I'd expected. Busy, loud, full of life and energy. We found a hotel overlooking the famous bay and spent our first day wandering around, taking in the sights and sounds. Mark was in full photographer mode, documenting everything from street vendors to cliff divers. Sophie and I were content to follow his lead, playing tourist and enjoying each other's company. It was our second morning there, as we were having breakfast at a beachside cafe, when my phone rang. I'd been checking it periodically for messages from family, but this was the first actual call I'd received since leaving Colorado. The caller ID showed my sister Amy's name. Hey Amy, I answered, stepping away from the table. Jake, thank God I reached you. I've been trying to call for hours. Something in her voice made me immediately alert. What's wrong? It's Dad. He had a heart attack yesterday morning. He's in the hospital and, Jake, it's bad. Really bad. My stomach dropped. How bad? He's in the ICU. They did emergency surgery, but the doctor says the next 48 hours are critical. Mom's been asking for you and, Jake, I think you need to come home. I looked back at the cafe, where Sophie was watching me with concern. We'd been planning to continue south along the coast, maybe all the way to Central America. The thought of cutting the trip short, of going back to Pittsburgh and everything I'd left behind, felt like a physical blow. Amy, I'm in Mexico. It'll take me at least 2 days to get back, maybe 3. Mexico? Jake, what are you doing in Mexico? Long story. Look, let me figure out how to get home, and I'll call you back with a timeline. Jake, please hurry. I don't know if. Just please come home as soon as you can. I'll be there, I said and hung up. I stood there for a moment, looking out at the Pacific Ocean, trying to process what had just happened. 2 days ago, I'd been thinking about staying in Mexico indefinitely, maybe even permanently. Now I was being called back to reality, back to my family, back to the life I'd been running away from. When I returned to the table, Sophie could immediately tell something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked. I explained the situation. Sophie listened without interrupting, but I could see her expression change as she realized what this meant for our journey together. "So you have to go back," she said when I finished. "Yeah, I don't really have a choice. It's my dad, and if he's in critical condition—" "Of course," she said quickly. "You have to be with your family. I understand completely," but I could hear the disappointment in her voice, and it matched what I was feeling in my chest. "What about you and Mark?" I asked. "What's your plan?" Sophie looked at Mark, who had been quietly listening to our conversation. "We were talking about continuing south," Mark said. "Maybe all the way to Panama or even into South America. I have contacts at some magazines there, and there are some incredible landscapes I'd like to photograph." "How long would that take?" I asked. "Another month, maybe 2, Sophie said. "It depends on how far we decide to go. A month or 2. She'd be gone for another month or 2, traveling through countries I'd probably never see, having adventures I'd only hear about in emails or phone calls, if I heard about them at all." "Sophie," I started. "Don't," she said, putting her finger to my lips. "Don't make this harder than it already is. We both knew this was temporary. We both have lives to get back to." But did I? Did I really have a life to get back to? Or just a job and an empty apartment and a pile of memories I was trying to forget? That afternoon, as I made arrangements to ship my motorcycle back to the States and book a flight home, Sophie surprised me. "What if you didn't go back?" she said suddenly. We were sitting on the beach in Acapulco, watching the waves roll in. Mark had gone to make some phone calls about his own travel plans. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if you stayed with us? What if you decided to keep traveling, keep exploring, keep this?" She gestured between us. The idea was tempting, incredibly tempting. The past few weeks had been the best of my life. I'd seen more, learned more, felt more than I had in years. And Sophie had awakened something in me I didn't even know existed. "I can't," I said finally. "Why not?" "Because it's my dad, Sophie. He's in critical condition. My family needs me." I know. I'm not suggesting you abandon your father. But what if after he recovers you came back? What if this isn't the end?" I looked at her, this beautiful, adventurous woman who was offering me a chance at a completely different future. "Sophie, I want to be with you. More than I've wanted anything in a long time. But I can't make promises about what happens after I get home. I don't know what I'm walking into, how long Dad will need me, what my family situation will be." "I understand," she said. "But I need you to know something. What we have here, it's not just vacation romance. At least not for me. You've changed my life, Jake. You've shown me what it means to trust someone completely, to be part of something bigger than myself." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small piece of paper with her contact information written on it. "This is my address in Lyon, my email, my phone number. When you're ready, if you're ready, find me. We'll figure out the rest together." I took the paper, looking at her neat handwriting. What if it takes months? What if things get complicated back home? Then it takes months. I'll be there. What about your job? Your life in France? My life in France will still be there. But what we have, this might not be. I'm willing to wait, Jake. The question is whether you think it's worth waiting for. I folded the paper carefully and put it in my wallet. "It's worth waiting for," I said. "You're worth waiting for." That evening, we had one last dinner together at a restaurant overlooking the bay. Mark raised a toast to our journey, to new friendships, to the adventures still to come. "This isn't goodbye," he said. "This is just see you later." But as I looked at Sophie across the table, her face lit by candlelight, I wondered if I'd ever see her again. Life had a way of pulling people in different directions, and I had no idea what was waiting for me back in Pittsburgh. The flight back to Pittsburgh was the longest of my life. I'd managed to get on a red-eye that would get me home by morning, but every minute felt like an hour. I kept thinking about the phone call from Amy, the fear in her voice, the possibility that I might not make it back in time. I also couldn't stop thinking about Sophie. Just 12 hours ago, we'd been planning our route south along the Mexican coast. Now I was flying north, back to a life I'd been running away from, and she was continuing the journey without me. Amy met me at the airport, and I could see immediately how much the stress was affecting her. My little sister had always been the strong one in the family, but she looked exhausted and scared. "How is he?" I asked as we got in her car. "Stable, but still critical. The surgery went well, but they said there was significant damage to his heart. The next few days will tell us a lot." "And Mom? She's been at the hospital since it happened. She won't leave." "Jake, I'm glad you're here. She needs to see you." The drive to the hospital gave me a chance to process what had happened. My dad, the man who'd taught me to work with my hands, who'd supported my decision to become a mechanic, who'd been so understanding when I'd left town, was lying in intensive care, fighting for his life. All the adventures I'd been having, all the self-discovery and romance and excitement, suddenly seemed insignificant compared to this. At the hospital, I found Mom sitting beside Dad's bed in the ICU. He was unconscious, hooked up to more machines than I'd ever seen, but he was breathing on his own, which the nurse told me was a good sign. Mom looked up when I walked in, and I saw relief flood her face. "Jake," she said, standing up to hug me. "I'm so glad you're here. How are you holding up, Mom?" "Better now that you're here. I was so scared we wouldn't be able to reach you." I sat down beside her and took her hand. "I'm here now, and he's going to be okay. He's too stubborn to let a heart attack stop him." She smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. That's what I keep telling myself. Over the next few days, I hardly left the hospital. Dad's condition slowly improved. He woke up on the second day, groggy but alert. By the end of the week, the doctors were talking about moving him to a regular room. But it was clear that his recovery would be long and complicated. He'd need cardiac rehabilitation, lifestyle changes, ongoing medical care. And Mom, who'd never handled the family finances or dealt with insurance companies, was overwhelmed by all the paperwork and decisions. "I'm going to need to stay for a while," I told Amy one evening as we sat in the hospital cafeteria. "Mom can't handle all this alone, and Dad's going to need help when he comes home." "What about your job? Your life?" I thought about Murphy's auto repair, about the apartment I'd abandoned, about the routine I'd been so eager to escape. "I'll figure it out," I said. But mostly I thought about Sophie, about the piece of paper in my wallet with her contact information, about the promise I'd made to find her when I was ready. I just didn't know when that would be. Meanwhile, I was slowly rebuilding my life from the ground up. It had been 3 months since Jake left, and I'd finally stopped expecting him to walk through the door. The divorce papers had been filed. I'd found a new job at a smaller real estate company called Hartley Properties, and I'd moved into a one-bedroom apartment I could actually afford. It wasn't easy. My new job paid about 30% less than what I'd been making at Morrison Real Estate, and my new boss, Patricia Hartley, was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who made it clear that she expected professionalism above all else. No long lunches, no expensive clothes, no special treatment. But for the first time in months, I could look at myself in the mirror without feeling ashamed. I'd also started seeing a therapist, something I never thought I'd do, but something that was helping me understand how I'd gotten to such a dark place. Dr. Williams didn't let me make excuses for my choices, but she also helped me see that I could learn from them and do better going forward. The affair wasn't really about Richard, she told me during one of our sessions. It was about your own insecurities, your fear that you weren't living up to some ideal of success that you'd created in your mind. "But I did love Jake," I protested. "I really did. I believe you. But you also resented him, didn't you? Resented that he was content with a simpler life than what you thought you deserved." It was hard to admit, but she was right. I had resented Jake's contentment, his ability to find satisfaction in his work and our life together. I'd wanted more money, more status, more excitement, and I'd been willing to lie and cheat to get it. One evening in late fall, I was walking home from work when I saw a familiar figure ahead of me on the sidewalk. It was Jake's mother, Carol, coming out of the grocery store with bags in both hands. For a moment, I considered crossing the street to avoid her. We hadn't spoken since that awful phone call right after Jake left. But something made me keep walking toward her. She saw me when I was about 10 feet away. Her expression didn't change, but she didn't look away either. "Hello, Jessica," she said when I reached her. "Mrs. Thompson," I said. "Can I help you with those bags?" She looked at me for a moment, then nodded. "Thank you." We walked in silence for a few blocks. Finally, she spoke. "I heard you got divorced." "Yes, a few weeks ago." "And that you left Morrison Real Estate." "Yes, I work at Hartley Properties now." She nodded. "Probably for the best." We walked another block in silence. Then she surprised me by asking, "How are you doing, Jessica?" "Really?" I thought about giving her a polite surface answer, but something about the way she asked made me tell the truth. "I'm trying to figure out how to be a better person," I said. "I'm seeing a therapist. I'm living within my means. I'm trying to be honest with myself and everyone else. Some days are better than others." She nodded. "That's all any of us can do." When we reached her house, she turned to face me. "Jessica, what you did to my son, that was wrong. It hurt him deeply, and it hurt our whole family." "I know," I said. "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am truly sorry." "I believe you are. But I also want you to know something. Jake is trying to figure out his life right now. His father had a heart attack a few months ago, and Jake came back to help with his care. He's been dealing with a lot." I felt a stab of concern. "Is Mr. Thompson okay?" "He's recovering, but it's been difficult. Jake has been a godsend, helping with medical appointments, handling insurance, just being there for his father and me." She paused, studying my face. "I'm telling you this not because I think you should contact him, but because I want you to understand that he's not the same person who left here angry and hurt. He's grown up a lot, and I hope you can be happy for him, wherever his life takes him." After she went inside, I stood on the sidewalk for a long time, thinking about what she'd said. Jake was back in Pittsburgh, taking care of his father. The man I'd driven away with my betrayal had come home to be there for his family when they needed him. It was exactly the kind of thing Jake would do. He'd always been the responsible one, the one who did the right thing even when it cost him. I hoped he'd found some happiness, even in the midst of dealing with his father's illness. He deserved that, and maybe, with time and work and honesty, I could build a life that deserved some happiness too. 6 weeks after Dad's heart attack, he was finally cleared to come home from the hospital. But home now meant a house that had been modified with grab bars, a hospital bed in the living room, and a strict schedule of medications and exercises. I'd moved back into my childhood bedroom to help with his care. Mom tried to insist that she could handle everything herself, but we all knew that wasn't realistic. Dad needed help getting around, and the cardiac rehabilitation program required someone to drive him to appointments 3 times a week. Murphy had been understanding about my extended absence, but I knew I couldn't impose on his generosity forever. We'd agreed that I'd come back to work part-time once Dad was more stable, but for now, my priority was family. The hardest part wasn't the caregiving. It was the waiting. Dad's recovery was slow and uncertain. Some days he seemed almost like his old self, joking around and complaining about having to take so many pills. Other days he was tired and discouraged, worried about being a burden, frustrated by his limitations. And through it all, I thought about Sophie. I'd sent her one email after I got back, just to let her know I'd made it home safely and that my father was stable. She'd written back immediately, telling me about their continued travels through Central America and asking about Dad's condition. Her message was warm and supportive, but I could sense the distance growing between us. How could it not? She was having adventures in Costa Rica and Panama while I was measuring out heart medications and helping my father with physical therapy exercises. We were living in completely different worlds. I kept her contact information in my wallet, taking it out sometimes to look at her handwriting, to remember what it felt like to be with her. But as the weeks turned into months, it seemed more and more like a fantasy from another life. One evening, as I was helping Dad with his evening medications, he looked at me with concern. "Jake, you can't put your life on hold indefinitely because of me." "I'm not putting my life on hold. I'm exactly where I need to be. No, son, you're not. You're a young man who should be out living his own life, not taking care of his old man. Dad, you had a serious heart attack. You need help right now. There's nothing more important than family. He reached over and took my hand. I appreciate everything you've done, more than you know. But I also know you left Pittsburgh for a reason. You were trying to find something, or maybe running away from something. Either way, you haven't finished that journey. I thought about that conversation for days afterward. Was he right? Was I using his illness as an excuse to avoid making difficult decisions about my own future? The truth was I was scared. Scared of leaving my family when they might still need me. Scared of pursuing something with Sophie that might not work out. Scared of taking risks when the safe, responsible choice was to stay put and take care of business at home. But I was also scared of waking up 5 years from now and realizing I'd let fear make all my decisions for me. It was a gray February morning when the letter arrived. I was getting ready to take Dad to his cardiologist appointment when Mom brought me an envelope with foreign postage. "This came for you," she said, looking curious. I recognized Sophie's handwriting immediately. My heart started racing as I opened it. "Dear Jake, I hope this letter finds you and your family well. Mark and I finished our journey through Central America last month and are back in Europe now. The experience was incredible, but I have to admit that it wasn't the same without you. I've been thinking a lot about our conversation in Acapulco, about waiting and timing and the chances we take in life. I realized that I don't want to just wait passively for something to happen. I want to make something happen. I've applied for a transfer to my company's American office. They have a division in Chicago that focuses on wind energy projects in the Midwest, and they're looking for someone with my background. If it comes through, I'll be moving to the United States in the spring. I'm not doing this just for you, Jake. I'm doing it because I've fallen in love with America during our travels, and because I think there are opportunities here for my career. But I won't lie, the possibility of being closer to you is definitely part of my decision. I don't expect anything from you. I know your family needs you right now, and I respect that completely. But I wanted you to know that I haven't forgotten what we had together, and I haven't given up hope that we might have a future. If you want to see me when I get to Chicago, if you're ready for that, you know how to reach me. If not, I understand. Either way, I wish you and your family all the best. With love, Sophie. I read the letter 3 times, sitting in my car outside the doctor's office while Dad waited inside. Sophie was coming to America. She was going to be in Chicago, less than 5 hours from Pittsburgh. The possibility I'd been afraid to hope for was becoming real. When I got home, I found Dad in his chair, looking more energetic than he had in weeks. "Good news from Dr. Martinez," he announced. "My latest tests look great. He says I can start driving again next week, and I'm cleared to go back to light activities." "That's fantastic, Dad." "It is. And it means you can stop babysitting me and get back to your own life." I sat down across from him. "What if I told you I might want to take a trip to Chicago?" He smiled. "I'd say it's about time. Is this about that French girl you met on your motorcycle trip?" I looked at him in surprise. "How did you?" "Son, I've been married to your mother for 35 years. You think I don't know the signs when a man's in love? You've been carrying around that piece of paper in your wallet for months, taking it out to look at it when you think nobody's watching." I pulled out Sophie's contact information and showed him the letter. He read it carefully, then handed it back to me. "She sounds like a keeper. But what about you and Mom? What if you need help? Jake, your mother and I managed to raise 2 kids and run a household for 30 years before you moved back in. I think we can figure out how to manage my heart medication." That evening, I sat down at my computer and started typing. "Dear Sophie, your letter was the best thing that's happened to me in months. My father is doing much better now, and I think it's time for me to take that leap of faith you wrote about. I'd love to see you when you get to Chicago. In fact, I'd love to help you get settled, if you'd like the company. I've been thinking about making some changes in my own life, and maybe it's time to stop thinking and start doing. I can't wait to see you again. Love, Jake." I hit send before I could change my mind. 3 days later, my phone rang. It was Sophie, calling from Lyon. "I got your email," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. I was hoping you would. I have news. I got the transfer. I'll be in Chicago by the end of March. That's incredible. Congratulations. Jake, are you sure about this? I don't want you to feel pressured because I'm moving closer. Sophie, I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I've spent the past 6 months taking care of everyone else's needs. It's time I started taking care of my own. And what do you need? I thought about everything that had happened since I'd left Acapulco, the fear and responsibility and waiting, the gradual realization that life was too short to spend it playing it safe. I need you, I said. I need the adventure, the possibility, the chance to become someone I actually like. I need us. Then you'll have us, she said softly. All of it. After we hung up, I sat in my childhood bedroom, looking at the posters on the walls and the trophies on the shelves, thinking about how much had changed since I'd first left Pittsburgh almost a year ago. I'd run away from one life and stumbled into another. Now I was choosing a third path, not running away from anything, but running toward something. Toward love, toward adventure, toward a future I couldn't quite imagine but was finally ready to embrace. It was the scariest and most exciting thing I'd ever done, and I couldn't wait to get started. 3 weeks after Sophie's phone call, I was driving my old Ford pickup through downtown Chicago, looking for the address she'd given me. Sophie had arrived in America 2 days earlier and was staying at an extended-stay hotel near her new office while she looked for an apartment. The past month had been a whirlwind of preparation. Dad's recovery had continued steadily. He was driving again, handling his own medication schedule, and even talking about going back to work part-time at a friend's shop. Mom was back to her normal routine, and Amy had taken over most of the coordination with doctors and insurance companies. We'll be fine, Mom had assured me as I packed for Chicago. Your father and I managed before you came back, and we'll manage now. Go find your happiness, Jake. Murphy had been understanding too, though I could tell he was disappointed. We'd worked out an arrangement where I'd finish out the month, training one of the newer mechanics to take over my responsibilities. You sure about this, kid? He'd asked on my last day. Chicago's a big city, lot different from Pittsburgh. I'm sure, I'd said. It's time for me to try something new. Now, sitting in Chicago traffic, I was nervous as hell. It had been almost 6 months since I'd seen Sophie. 6 months of letters and phone calls and careful planning. What if the magic we'd had in Mexico couldn't survive the reality of everyday life in America? I found her hotel and parked outside. She was waiting in the lobby when I walked in, and the moment I saw her, all my doubts disappeared. She looked different, more professional in her business clothes, her hair a little shorter, but her smile was exactly the same. Jake, she said, standing up and walking toward me. Sophie. We stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. Then she stepped forward and kissed me, and it was like no time had passed at all. I can't believe you're really here, she said when we broke apart. I can't believe you're really here either. How's the new job? Overwhelming but exciting. They've got me working on a huge wind farm project in Iowa. But tell me about your father. How is he doing? We spent the next hour catching up, sitting in the hotel lobby like teenagers afraid to be alone together. Finally, Sophie laughed and said, "This is ridiculous. Come on. Let me show you my temporary home." Her room was small but clean, with a view of the Chicago skyline. She'd already made it feel like hers. Photos from our Mexico trip on the desk, her engineering books stacked neatly on the table, a French phrase book next to the bed. It's not much, but it's home for now, she said. It's perfect, I said, and I meant it. Anywhere she was felt like home to me. That evening, we walked through downtown Chicago, talking about everything and nothing. Sophie showed me her office building. We had dinner at a little Italian place she'd discovered, and slowly we began to bridge the gap that 6 months apart had created. Jake, she said as we sat by Lake Michigan, watching the lights reflect on the water, I need you to know something. I don't expect you to just drop your life and move here. I know you have responsibilities in Pittsburgh, and I respect that. What if I told you I was thinking about dropping my life and moving here anyway? She looked at me with surprise. Are you serious? Dead serious. Sophie, These past 6 months taught me something important. Taking care of my family when they needed me, that was the right thing to do. But they don't need me anymore, not the way they did. And I need to start living for myself. What would you do here? For work? I mean, I'd been thinking about that during the drive. Chicago's got a lot of motorcycle riders. Probably not many who specialize in European bikes. I was thinking about starting my own shop. That's a big risk. Yeah, it is. But you know what's a bigger risk? Spending the rest of my life wondering what if. She leaned over and kissed me again. Then let's stop wondering. 6 months later, I was the owner of Thompson European Motorcycles, located in a converted garage on the north side of Chicago. It wasn't much to look at yet. Concrete floors, exposed ceiling, the smell of oil and metal that would probably never go away. But it was mine. Sophie had been instrumental in the planning. Her engineering background helped me design an efficient workflow, and her business sense kept me from making rookie mistakes with suppliers and insurance. We'd spent countless evenings at her apartment, which had become our apartment, poring over business plans and lease agreements. You know, she said one evening as we painted the shop's interior, I never thought I'd be helping my boyfriend start a motorcycle repair business. Is that what I am? Your boyfriend? She paused, paintbrush in hand, and looked at me seriously. What would you like to be? I'd been thinking about that question for weeks. Sophie's work visa was temporary, and if we wanted to build a permanent life together, we'd need to make it official. I'd like to be your husband, I said. She set down her paintbrush and turned to face me completely. Are you proposing to me in a motorcycle shop that smells like motor oil? Would you prefer somewhere more romantic? Jake Thompson, this is the most romantic place in the world, because it's ours. Yes, I'll marry you. We were married 3 months later in a small ceremony at Chicago City Hall. Sophie's parents flew in from France. Her father turned out to be exactly as I'd imagined, intellectual and reserved but warm once you got to know him. Her mother was more outgoing, immediately taking charge of the wedding arrangements despite the language barrier. My parents and Amy drove up from Pittsburgh, and I could see the relief in their eyes when they met Sophie. They'd been worried that I was making impulsive decisions, but spending time with Sophie convinced them that this wasn't just a rebound romance. She's good for you, Mom told me the night before the wedding. I can see how happy she makes you. She does, I said. I didn't know I could feel this way about someone. The shop was doing better than I'd expected. Word spread quickly through the Chicago motorcycle community that there was finally someone who really understood European bikes. I specialized in BMWs and Ducatis, but I could work on pretty much anything with 2 wheels. Sophie's job was going well too. The wind farm project in Iowa was a huge success, and her company was talking about making her a permanent resident and eventually sponsoring her for citizenship. We're really doing this, aren't we? She said one evening as we sat in our small apartment, eating takeout Chinese food and going over the shop's books. Doing what? Building a life together. A real life, with real responsibilities and real problems and real happiness. I looked around our apartment, small but comfortable, filled with an eclectic mix of her French furniture and my American stuff, photos from our Mexico trip mixed with pictures of our families. Yeah, I said, we really are. The best news came on a cold February morning, when Sophie woke up feeling nauseous for the 3rd day in a row. I think I need to see a doctor, she said, looking pale. Are you feeling okay? Do you think you're getting sick? She looked at me with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Jake, I think I might be pregnant. 2 hours later, we were sitting in a doctor's office, staring at a positive pregnancy test. Congratulations, the doctor said. Based on your symptoms and the test results, I'd say you're about 6 weeks along. I looked at Sophie, who was crying and laughing at the same time. We're going to be parents, she said. We're going to be parents, I repeated, still not quite believing it. The pregnancy was smooth, though Sophie's morning sickness lasted well into her 2nd trimester. I found myself becoming fiercely protective, worrying about everything from her nutrition to whether the fumes in the shop were safe for the baby. Jake, you need to relax, she told me one evening as I reorganized our kitchen to make it more baby-safe. Women have been having babies for thousands of years. I think I can handle being pregnant while you fix motorcycles. But I couldn't help it. After everything I'd been through, losing Jessica, finding Sophie, nearly losing my father, the idea that we were creating new life together felt miraculous and fragile at the same time. Sophie's parents visited when she was 7 months pregnant, and my parents came up from Pittsburgh a month later. It was chaos having 4 grandparents-to-be fussing over Sophie, but she handled it with good humor. At least we know the baby will have plenty of people who love her, she said. Her? I asked. Or him? I have a feeling, though. She was right. Emma Sophie Thompson was born on a snowy December morning, weighing 6 pounds, 3 ounces, and immediately becoming the center of our universe. She's perfect, Sophie whispered as we looked at our daughter for the first time. She's incredible, I agreed. She looks just like you. She has your stubborn chin, Sophie said, laughing through her tears. The shop had to close for a week while I learned how to be a father, but my customers were understanding. Many of them had kids of their own and shared stories about sleepless nights and the overwhelming joy of parenthood. You're about to discover that you can function on way less sleep than you thought possible, one of my regular customers told me. But you're also about to discover that you have more capacity for love than you ever imagined. He was right on both counts. Emma was 6 months old when we had our first encounter with my past. We were at a motorcycle show at McCormick Place, Sophie pushing Emma in her stroller while I looked at the latest European models and talked to potential customers. The shop was doing well enough that I was thinking about expanding, maybe hiring an assistant. I was examining a new BMW when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Well, I'll be damned. Jake Thompson. I turned around to see Murphy standing there, grinning widely. He looked older than I remembered, but his handshake was still firm. Murphy, what are you doing in Chicago? My nephew lives here, and he's been bugging me to come visit. Thought I'd check out the show while I was in town. He looked around appreciatively. This is quite a setup. Much bigger than anything we get in Pittsburgh. Murphy, I'd like you to meet my wife, Sophie, and our daughter Emma. Murphy's eyes lit up when he saw the baby. Well, hello there, little one. Aren't you beautiful? Emma, who usually cried when strangers talked to her, actually smiled at Murphy. Sophie and I exchanged surprised looks. She likes you, Sophie said. That's unusual. She's normally very shy with people she doesn't know. Kids can sense good people, Murphy said, then looked back at me. Jake, I've got to say you look happier than I've ever seen you. Marriage and fatherhood agree with you. They do, I said. I never knew life could be this good. I'm glad for you, kid. Really glad. And I heard through the grapevine that you've got your own shop now. How's that working out? I told him about Thompson European Motorcycles, about the growing customer base and the plans for expansion. He listened with the pride of a mentor watching his students succeed. You know, he said when I finished, if you ever need any advice about the business side of things, or if you want to talk about partnership opportunities, give me a call. I've been thinking about expanding too. Maybe opening a second location somewhere. It was a generous offer, but I could tell he understood that I needed to build this on my own. After Murphy left, Sophie and I walked around the show, Emma gurgling happily in her stroller. He seems like a good man, Sophie said. He is. He gave me my start, taught me most of what I know about running a business. In a lot of ways, he's like a second father to me. Do you miss it? Pittsburgh, your old life. I thought about that as we watched a demo of the latest Ducati. Did I miss Pittsburgh? I missed my family, certainly, and there were things about the city that would always be part of me. But the life I'd been living there, the routine, the limitations, the sense that I was settling for less than I could be, I didn't miss that at all. I miss the people, I said finally. But I don't miss the person I was there, if that makes sense. It makes perfect sense, Sophie said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. I feel the same way about France. I love my country, and I love my family, but the person I am here, with you, this is who I was meant to be. That evening, after we'd put Emma to bed, we sat on our small balcony overlooking the Chicago skyline, talking about the future. Murphy's offer was interesting, Sophie said. Partnership opportunities. Yeah, it was, though I'm not sure I'm ready for that yet. I like being my own boss. What if it wasn't with Murphy? What if it was with someone else? Someone who understood European engineering. I looked at her suspiciously. Are you thinking about changing careers? I'm thinking about a lot of things. My work visa expires in 2 years, and while the company is sponsoring me for permanent residency, it's still not guaranteed. Maybe it would be good to have options. You want to become a motorcycle mechanic? She laughed. I want to become your business partner. I know more about the engineering side of these bikes than most mechanics ever will, and you know more about the practical repair side than most engineers. Together, we could build something really special. I thought about it. The idea of working with Sophie every day, of building a business together the same way we'd built our marriage and our family, was incredibly appealing. What about Emma? There are good daycare centers, and your parents have been hinting that they'd love to spend more time with their granddaughter. We could make it work. You really want to do this? Jake, I want to build a life with you. All of it, the work, the family, the dreams, the challenges. I want us to be partners in everything. I leaned over and kissed her. Then let's be partners in everything. 2 years later, Thompson European Motorcycles had become one of the most respected specialty shops in the Midwest. Sophie had proven to be as good at customer service as she was at diagnosis, and her engineering background gave us credibility with the high-end European bike owners who formed our core clientele. Emma was walking and talking, bilingual in English and French, and had already shown an alarming interest in taking apart anything mechanical she could get her hands on. She's definitely your daughter, Sophie said one morning as we watched Emma methodically disassemble a toy motorcycle in our kitchen. She's definitely our daughter, I corrected. She's got your methodical approach and my stubborn determination. It was a Saturday morning, and we were getting ready to drive down to Pittsburgh for my dad's 60th birthday party. Dad's recovery had been complete, better than complete, actually. The heart attack had scared him into taking better care of himself, and he was in better shape now than he'd been in years. I'm nervous about seeing everyone, Sophie admitted as we packed Emma's diaper bag. Why? They love you. I know. But this will be the first time I see some of your extended family since the wedding. What if they think I'm the foreign woman who stole their Jake away from his hometown? Sophie, you didn't steal me from anywhere. You saved me from a life I was settling for. There's a big difference. The drive to Pittsburgh gave us time to talk about everything that had happened since we'd left Chicago. Business was booming, Emma was thriving, and we just found out that Sophie was pregnant again. How do you think Emma will handle having a little brother or sister? Sophie asked as we crossed the state line into Pennsylvania. I think she'll be great. She's already so protective of the neighbor's cat, and she loves playing with other kids at daycare. I hope this one is as easy as Emma was. Even if it's not, we'll figure it out. We always do. The party was held at the same community center where Sophie and I had had our first dance at my cousin's wedding 3 years earlier. It was strange being back in that room, surrounded by faces from my past, introducing my French wife and bilingual daughter to aunts and uncles and childhood friends. But what struck me most was how natural it felt. Sophie fit in seamlessly, charming my relatives with her mix of French sophistication and Midwestern practicality. Emma was passed from lap to lap, showing off her ability to count in both languages. She's beautiful, Jake, my Aunt Marie told me as we watched Emma demonstrate her walking skills for yet another admiring relative. And Sophie, she's perfect for you. I can see how happy she makes you. She does, I said. I never knew life could be this good. Later that evening, after Emma had fallen asleep in my childhood bedroom and Sophie was downstairs helping Mom with the dishes, I found myself alone with Dad on the back porch. You did good, son, he said, handing me a beer. Thanks, Dad. I mean it. When you left here 3 years ago, you were angry and hurt and running away from everything. Now look at you. Successful business, beautiful family, clear sense of who you are and what you want. That takes guts. I had some help along the way, Sophie mainly, but also you and Mom. The way you supported my decision to leave, even when you were worried about me. Parents worry, Jake. That's what we do. But we also have to trust that we raised our kids to make good decisions, even when those decisions take them far from home. We sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood kids playing in backyards, lawnmowers running, the distant sound of traffic on the main road. "Dad," I said finally, "I need to tell you something." "What's that?" "When I first left Pittsburgh, I was running away from Jessica and everything that represented. But somewhere along the way, I stopped running away and started running toward something. Toward Sophie. Toward the life I have now. Toward becoming the person I was meant to be." He nodded. "That's the difference between escaping and growing up. Took me a while to figure that out myself." "What do you mean?" "When I was your age, I thought about leaving Pittsburgh too. Thought about going somewhere bigger, more exciting. But I stayed because it was safe, because it was what was expected. Don't get me wrong. I'm happy with the life I built here. But I always wondered what might have been if I'd had the courage to take the risks you took." "You don't regret staying?" "No, I don't regret it. But I'm proud that you didn't let fear make your decisions for you. You chose love over safety, adventure over comfort, growth over stagnation. That's not easy to do." The next morning, as we were getting ready to drive back to Chicago, Mom pulled me aside. "Jake, there's something I want to give you," she said, handing me a small wrapped package. I opened it to find my father's wedding ring from his first marriage, the one that had ended in divorce when I was a baby, long before he met Mom. "I don't understand," I said. "Your father wanted you to have it. Not to wear, but to remember. He said it represents the difference between settling for someone who looks right on paper and waiting for someone who's right in your heart." I looked across the room at Sophie, who was helping Emma put on her shoes, laughing at something our daughter had said. "I understand," I said, putting the ring in my pocket. "Thank you." As we drove back to Chicago, Emma sleeping in her car seat and Sophie dozing in the passenger seat, I thought about everything that had brought me to this moment. The betrayal that had broken my heart but set me free. The chance encounter on a mountain road in Colorado. The choice to take risks instead of playing it safe. None of it had been planned. Most of it had been scary. All of it had been worth it. "Jake," Sophie said softly, opening her eyes as we crossed back into Illinois. "Yeah. I love you. I love our life. I love that we took the chances we took." "I love you too," I said. "All of it. Every crazy, imperfect, wonderful bit of it." She smiled and closed her eyes again. In the rearview mirror, I could see Emma sleeping peacefully, one small hand clutching a toy motorcycle. We were almost home. Thank you for your viewing. See you next time. If you enjoyed this, subscribe to JK Tells a Story for more tales.